and motivational content on the platform. I'm super excited to announce a new experience on CreativeLive. It's called Fast Class. You've told us that you're busy and sometimes it's hard to dive into a full class from start to finish. So essentially, we're now giving you a shortened highlight version of our top CreativeLive classes. You can always dive into the full class with 5, 10, or 15 hours of great content. But now, if you're just looking to focus on a few of the highlights or want to be able to skip quickly to something that really interests you, you can now get a shortened fast class version of that class. We're also thinking this might be able to help you explore a new craft and save time while doing it. This is a great tool to curate your learning experience to help create the life that you seek. So you're probably thinking, great, how do I access this new experience on CreativeLive? That's easy. All you have to do is be a subscriber to the Creator Pass, and then all this is yours.
There are a lot of myths about what it means to be a creative person. We're lazy, disorganized, we don't know how to keep to a schedule, we are unproductive, never on time, we turn things in late, we're horrible! Let's not allow those things to define us. I'm going to show you concrete examples of workflows, of how to set up a to-do list each week, and also how to effectively block your time. Not having healthy work habits and believing that's who you are gets in the way of you doing good work. It's time to change the narrative about creatives, workflow, time management, and productivity.
If you're feeling isolated and looking for creative connection, try tuning into creativelive.com/TV. That's where we've got a 24/7 live stream from the kitchen counters.
I can do that backlit shot that I really like to do.
From the studios and living rooms of many of the world's top creators, where we're doing musical performances, Q&As, cooking shows, virtual book tour events, drawing, spoken word poetry, and more.
Life passed me by waiting for an invitation when the world is greater than my nation or my occupation. Be someone you've never been. You feel all that adrenaline? It's medicine.
It actually helps me feel like my days are more purposeful.
I hope that out of this deep pain will come some collective growth.
Dive into CreativeLive TV today.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to CreativeLive TV. I'm your host, Kenna Klosterman, and we are so excited to bring you another live stream today. And today is going to be with Lisa Congdon. So what I want you to do is get your coffee ready, and we are going to get crafty. We're going to make some art. But first of all, just if you are just seeing CreativeLive TV for the very first time, several weeks ago, we launched CreativeLive TV to take you to the living rooms, the kitchens, the home studios of artists, entrepreneurs, musicians, just to bring you entertainment, to bring you inspiration, and really to connect us all during these very challenging times. And we hope that you are all doing well, that your loved ones are doing well as we continue to push through these times. So just wanted to start out by saying a thank you, of course, to all of the frontline workers. So I'm coming to you from my dining room here, and we are going to head down to Portland virtually to be with Lisa Congdon. She is an artist, an illustrator, an author of 8 different books. She's been an educator on CreativeLive. Live. You can find her art in everywhere from Crate and Barrel to little craft shops on clothing and incredible work. So super excited to give you some things to work on today, whether it's with all ages, with Lisa Congdon. So Lisa, welcome to Creative Live TV.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So happy to have you here coming from your home. So first of all, how are you doing, you and your loved ones?
We're doing pretty well, all things considered. I mean, I think for most people, this is a kind of a stressful time because we don't know from day to day what's happening, what we're going to read in the news, or, I think really mostly like what life is going to be like in 3 weeks or a month or 2 months, or can we plan a vacation? Can we still go on that trip or to that wedding in September or whatever? And that is a lot of kind of like under the surface kind of pressure that we all feel, or stress that we all feel. And so I'm trying to stay in touch with that, acknowledge it, but also focus on what I have control over. So part of what we've been doing in my house is cooking a lot of food. I actually got into a slight argument with my wife last night about the fact that we had spent more money on groceries in the last 40 days than we normally do. And I was trying to argue that normally we go out to eat more. And she said, actually, no, even considering how much we would normally go out to eat, like even counting that, we still are spending more money on groceries. And I said, well, it's the one pleasure we have right now is to like make these meals together. And so we're spending a lot of time cooking, taking walks outside. I'm fortunate that I live in a city where there's enough open space to ride your bike and run without being close to other people. So I've been doing a bit of that, getting outside a lot and making a lot of art. Yeah. So
well, that is why we wanted to, when I saw what you were doing already, whether that is some of the projects you've been doing with Adobe and just reaching out to people and giving them tools. I wanted to have you come on and do that for our community, your community, as well as support you in your efforts. You are a full-time creative, obviously, and I know in watching everything that you've been doing, follow you on Instagram, that you've had to close down your studio, although it's now open again, but and you're preparing for a solo exhibition, all these things that are your business. And so how have you been coping with that?
Yeah, that's been a whole other thing that so on the one hand, I feel really privileged that I actually have stuff to work on right now that I'm being paid for, because I know a lot of creatives who are maybe at a different spot in their career, or just kind of like were in a different spot in the year where they were maybe expecting work to come along and don't have it yet. I feel grateful that I've got stuff to focus on, but it's also, there are lots of aspects of my business that have had to change. So I do actually, I'm at home right now in my home office. I have a studio out in my garage, but the internet's terrible out there. So we're going to work in here today. And I had to, for a period of time, for about 35 days, I closed my online shop. You could still place an order, but we weren't shipping because I have an employee who does all of that for me, and it didn't feel safe to have her come here and use my bathroom in my house and everything. And then we figured out over the last week, like how we could have her come back to ship orders and work. But not interact with each other at all and have that space be quarantined for her. And so we're back to shipping orders, although it's slow. I also have a shop, like an in-person shop that's in the front of my other studio on the other few miles away from my house, but I've had to close that down. And so that's definitely closed indefinitely. So that's been hard because I rely on a lot of tourist traffic, especially in the summer, to support that shop. It pays my studio rent. So that's been hard. But like I said, I also have a lot of other stuff that's still in progress. So I have a show that opens at a gallery here in Portland on June 6th. And I don't know that we're going to have anybody, there probably will be no opening. If we have people come in to view it, it's going to be in small doses. And we're trying to be really innovative about how we think about that. I also have a handful of, or 2 publishing projects and 1 client project that I'm working on right now. So that's keeping me really focused and busy every day, so that my mind doesn't sort of spin out of control. And I'm also just, my solo show is just basically my own personal work. And so I feel really lucky that I have this space to make a bunch of personal work, and then I get to like put it in this space and have everyone, view it. And that I feel really grateful for that, because it's giving me a sense of purpose right now, that I have this thing to work toward. Yeah.
I think that's so important, is that sense of purpose, which right now can be challenging on certain days, and that's okay. The other thing that I've been inspired by is the daily journal that you've been creating, and again, showing vulnerability, which of course I think is so important to connect with people. And so tell us about, and maybe can we see a little bit of what you've been creating?
Yeah. So I, on March 16th, which was technically the first day of quarantine here in Portland. So it was like 45 days ago now. I decided, well, I had written a post about, I've been writing about the pandemic and creativity for the last 45 days, but that around that time, I had written a post about how I was feeling, and one of my followers said that she was going to start a coronavirus diary. And I thought, that is such a great idea. So I kind of stole the idea, although we connected about it, and she's really excited that I'm doing it too. And now a bunch of other people are doing it as well. And so I had this journal that is actually a sketchbook that I had bought. It's pretty big. You can see in relationship to my face. And I had originally planned to keep a sketchbook this year, and then I just never could get into it. I used to be an avid sketchbook keeper, and now that I started drawing digitally mostly, I have been keeping a sketchbook, not as much as I used to. And so I had this blank, beautiful, big sketchbook sitting in my studio, and I was like, that's my coronavirus journal. So I started writing in it every day, or drawing pictures, painting, talking about my experience every day. Sometimes my experience is about gratitude. Sometimes it's about grief, and thinking about all the things I feel like I've lost or had to put off during this time, including a vacation. I started quarantine the day after, or the Monday after the Friday that I finished treatment for breast cancer. So I was ready to go back out into the world, and yet I was immunocompromised. So I had to, stay at home even more than most people, even in the shelter in place for a few weeks. And so I was having a lot of feelings about just being holed up. And I had already been sort of mildly quarantined during January and February and early March, because I was in treatment after surgery and radiation. And so a lot of my journal is just about sort of the grief, the gratitude, just my boring everyday experiences, from the stupid things that I'm eating for lunch to my reflections on, I don't know, all kinds of mundane things. It's a way for me to express and also share with people. So I post them in my stories on Instagram every day. And they're they're archived, most of them, in one of my Instagram story highlights. So if people want to check them out.
And that's at Lisa Congdon on Instagram. Again, I just really appreciate your vulnerability, whether that was through your cancer treatments. And I can only imagine that for anyone who's immunocompromised, that really adds this layer of, like you said, fear, grief, which, of course, when we turn to creativity, that is something that allows us to work through that.
Yes.
So
yes.
What are we going to do today? I want to give a shout out to folks who are tuning in on whether it's on creativelive.com/TV, which is this live stream that we are doing every day, and or on Facebook. We're on live on Facebook, live on YouTube, live on Twitter. So let us know where you are tuning in from. We have Tu who says that she couldn't wait to see your Corona Journal she's on Facebook. So thank you for that. So what are we going to do? I've got some supplies ready for me, but let's talk about it.
I want to show everyone my t-shirt. It says make all the things. And I am sort of known for painting and drawing, but I make so many other things besides that. I've been diving into ceramics in the last year and sewing quilts. And actually this being quarantined has sort of allowed me time and space, oddly, to work on things that I normally wouldn't do. And I decided to start making, I used to be an avid collager, somebody who did use the medium of collage, paper collage. And I haven't done it in a long time. And when I had to sort of shift the work I was making for my show because I couldn't make giant paintings in my house like I could in my other studio. And so I decided to make some smaller pieces. And I said, what better medium for a small piece than a collage, and something that's really easy and something that doesn't require a ton of materials. So I am going to show everyone, I'll show you the example of what we're going to make when I turn my phone around so you can see over my desk. But and I'll also show some examples of some other collages that I've been making recently. But we're going to do cut paper collage, I call them shapes collages. So basically, I'll go over the supplies again when I turn the camera around, but you need scissors or an X-Acto knife, but I recommend scissors because X-Acto knives can be unwieldy and dangerous. Glue stick or any kind of if you don't have a glue stick, a liquid glue is fine, but use it sparingly because it can warp your paper. And then paper scraps, and that could be anything from stuff you literally pull out of the trash to, I know you've got some magazines that you're going to use. I actually have origami paper. I collect paper, so I just use what I've got. And actually, you can paint your own paper. So some of the examples I'm going to show you are of some pieces I've made recently where I painted in my own palette pieces of paper, then cut that paper out and collaged it. So you have endless options. And we're going to work primarily in just very simple shapes today. And the working this way kind of is really great practice for composition and creating balance in your work. Whether you draw or paint or anything, like working on composition is a struggle for a lot of people. And making the kind of collage we're going to make today is really great practice in composition. So yeah.
Cool. Let's get to it.
Okay. I'm going to turn my camera around and I'll let you know when I'm ready.
Okay, awesome. So just again, if you guys are just tuning in, we are here with Lisa Congdon. Want to let you guys know what some of the other things that she has been doing that I've been seeing her do and really excited about. She partnered with Adobe and Adobe Create and created this beautiful piece that people are coloring in. So you can print it out like a coloring book, and it has a beautiful sentiment. And so we're seeing people create that all over the world, and Lisa's posting those on her Instagram. And then also she has been she created a series of art classes. I think it's a 4-part series. And that is, again, with Adobe. And that's for your kids. So super, I know a lot of people are at home with their kids looking for more projects. And so you can check that out on her Instagram, where up at the link in bio, and you can go check out those classes. So thank you for doing those. Lisa, it is looking good on your setup.
I'm ready.
Okay,
right,
awesome.
Sit down here, and then I'm going to talk you through a few things. So I just want to apologize in advance if the table shakes. This isn't the most stable table in the universe. And so hopefully it won't make anyone seasick. All right. So as I mentioned, you're going to need, and of course, if you don't have these supplies at your ready right now, this is just what you'd want to get if you want to do this yourself. So I've got like paper scraps, and you can see they're just a hot mess, but that doesn't matter because we're just going to be using scraps. This is kind of an example of what we're going to make today, like a mountain of shapes. But I wanted to show you some other examples of things that I've made in the past. This is actually like a fold out vintage postcard book, like looks like an accordion book. This is actually from about 6 or 7 years ago, but so I've been doing this kind of shapes collage for a long time. Can you see that? I can't see my. I
absolutely can, and it's so cool. Yeah. I love it.
So I was like collaging this colorful paper on top of this old postcard book. I also cut out shapes. I drew I also sort of embellished in ink in some places. So this is where I went kind of crazy. And then I wanted to show you some of the pieces that I've been making for my show. These are going to be framed in shadow boxes. They're super simple. And this is the paper that I actually painted myself in my sort of the color palette, the paint color palette that I love. And then I made these arrangements on, this is kind of soft Bristol drawing paper, but I like it for collage because it's really smooth. So it's easy to glue to. Here's one of my eyes and a spade there. So anyway, you can see these are some cut paper shapes collages that I've been making. All right, we ready to start?
We are ready.
Okay, so this is my example, and as I mentioned earlier, part of what makes this fun is just kind of messing around with color and composition. And there are there's probably more than 3 ways, but 3 ways that I really think about achieving balance overall in a collage piece is through color. So notice that colors are sort of dispersed throughout in a way that's pleasing to the eye. You want to vary the size of your shapes as well. So I've got some that are really small and some that are bigger, and then sort of where they're placed, like the placement of the shapes helps to achieve balance. So this is a smaller version. I'm going to make a bigger one today. And I like to start with bigger shapes on the bottom. And so I've already cut a few shapes out, and I'll probably cut a few more as we go. And kind of feel free to ask me questions or whatever as we go. And I'm using this Yoo-Hoo glue stick. I love Yoo-Hoo because it's archival, meaning it's acid free, so it won't damage your paper over time. So I like to start at the bottom and work my way up. And notice that the curves on my shape aren't perfect. We're not aiming for any kind of perfection here. Looking for stuff that I've already got. I like this one. This is, by the way, I'm using origami paper, which I love to collage with because it's really thin and easy to glue down. When you're working like in this way that I was showing you earlier, where you're painting on already somewhat heavy paper, you actually have to weight down your collage with a book because the glue, the paper is so thick that it wants to curl up. But when you're using thin paper like origami paper, you don't have to do that. And another weird thing about origami paper is if it's exposed to the elements, it will fade. It is not archival. So if you're making something that you want to be shown in a museum someday, don't use origami paper.
Lisa, that's what I was just going to ask you. What materials did you use for the ones that will be framed and in shows?
Yeah, so I used this Bristol paper I used the same paper that's my substrate, which is this Bristol. I'm going to show you. I'm going to reach back here and pull it out. So I like this. Oh, no, wait. Yeah, this is Bristol Smooth Surface. It's drawing paper, but it doesn't have the teeth that a lot of like watercolor paper has. And so I paint on that with acrylic paints. They happen to be the same paints that I use in the big paintings on wood that I'm making for the show. So the colors will complement each other. And then I let it dry, and then I cut out the shapes. So it's just acrylic on paper. Okay, so now I have my kind of like first layer. Looks like, you know, a lot of these shapes collages end up looking somewhat representational. They can look like stacked rocks. They can look like a mountain range. And I also have this, I've kind of chosen a palette ahead of time, which is this palette that's more like fruity colors, which I love. It's not my usual palette, but
when you are combining colors, then creating that palette for people who's like, it's not as intuitive, how do you go about that?
Well, what I recommend people do is, you know, especially it's easy with collage too. You can kind of get out a stack of paper and then curate, before you start cutting, curate a color palette for yourself that you like. I have some patterned paper in here that's complimentary. Like, this is really fun. Somebody gave me this like hand painted paper, and it even has a little bit of sparkle in it. And I like the way all of these look together, and I like the contrast between the black and the pastels as well. But, you know, part of choosing color is just sort of like, I don't know, experimenting with what is appealing to you. There's no right or wrong way to do color. You just want to like balance muted tones with brighter tones. Like, this one's really muted. This is more fluorescent. And then balance muted tones with like sharper tones, like a black or a dark blue. So I'm sort of building here. And the way I like to think about building it, and I did that when I was doing this one, is like, if this were an actual stack of things, what would cause it to stay stacked versus collapse, right? That's a good way to think about achieving balance. And I'll be adding smaller details as we go. Right now, all of my shapes are a little bit on the larger side. This is also a really, really fun activity for children. And you can have them cut out shapes ahead of time, and then just make collages out of the cut shapes. And if your kids are old enough to sort of mess around with glue, it's very satisfying. I also want to say, when you're cutting out circles and these sort of arch half circle shapes, which I love to use, you're going to end up with a lot of paper that looks like this, right? Has these curves. And then you can make another collage that's just like the negative space that you've taken away, which is another great exercise, like using your scraps in that way.
I love that. It's like a moon.
Yeah, exactly. So notice I'm like, as I'm going along, I'm thinking like, okay, what do I want to put on here next? And I think I actually am going to go find a little black, because I want the eye to sort of move across the piece. And if you have if this was the only piece of black that I had on my collage, then, you know, I might be, the eye would just come here. And you want people who are looking at your work to view the whole thing, and you want it to tell a sort of story. And so I had grabbed this piece of tangerine paper, which is the same color as this, and I was going to put it here, and I thought, no, they're too close together. That's not working for me. So I'm going to put that away and find something else that I haven't used yet. There's some, oh yeah, I've got orange already. So I think I'm going to go with some black, and I'm going to cut out, by the way, I'm using tonic scissors. You can order them online. They're wonderful scissors, like sharp, wonderful for crafting. I've got two sizes. These I use for like smaller snips, and these I use for bigger pieces. I was introduced to those by my friend Diana, who has a bunch of really tiny tonic scissors that I love. Okay. So I've got this little stray piece here that's bothering me. Okay. I think I'm going to use now some of this polka dot paper. This is wrapping paper that my friend Lorena gave me a gift in a few years ago that I kept because I loved it. And I'm going to make a circle, another circle shape here. So notice that most of the shapes I'm using are variations on circles or ovals, half shapes, these sort of scallop shapes. And I'm just building, and if you keep a sketchbook, you can also make a shapes collage in your sketchbook, as long as the paper is not super heavy. The size of your shapes is actually is another thing that's gonna create a sense of balance. So I've got some orange here. I'm gonna put one here, and I'm gonna like make this one sort of sit right there on the corner of that one, because I think that creates some sense of balance.
Lisa, it's so interesting to hear your thought process and see it, in action. Like, I wouldn't have thought about that. Oh yeah, that is balancing, and now the three are balancing. Love it.
Right. And it's always like, as you're going, I have a lot of these sort of orange tones right here, and I've got two larger pink ones down here in the corner. I definitely want to add some more of those, but I've also got this piece of black that I want to try and mess around with using. And the great thing about collage is you can kind of lay something down first before you glue it and say, is that working? And if I put this here, it looks interesting, but it's too much black on the left-hand side. I think I want to move that over. I'm going to hold on to this one a little longer and maybe use it, make it smaller. In the meantime, I'm going to go find another piece of, ooh, this one's kind of interesting. Make that a little smaller. I really like the organic, playing with organic shapes. And, you can make them touch and butt up against each other and kind of create a puzzle that fits together, or you can keep space between them. I like to make my shapes collages have some elements of each of them touching.
Lisa, what do you mean by organic shapes for people?
So shapes that are not too perfect, right? So we have a perfect, not that there aren't things in nature that aren't perfect circles, but a perfect rectangle or a perfect circle or a perfect triangle, right? That I'm cutting shapes that are imperfect, and organic shapes, or shapes that you would find in nature, in organisms, are typically not perfect. They're a little bit wonky, versus having hard edges and being completely symmetrical. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Sure. Okay. So I'm still trying to figure out what I'm going to do next. I feel like there needs to be something right here. And so I think I'm going to put another black shape. I like the pops of black in this, but I got to make sure that I'm being strategic about where they go, because I want the piece to look balanced. And again, this might feel hard if you're a beginner, but eventually it will get easier. This sense of creating balance.
I want to give a shout out to Ellen on Facebook. She said she's happy to be here from Santa Fe. And Joanne, who's tuning in from Wisconsin. Whether you're on creativelive.com/TV or if you're tuning out on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, let us know where you are tuning in from.
This one almost looks like a sun on top of a mountain. So again, when you're using organic shapes, they sometimes will actually mimic things in nature, which is kind of fun. So I'm sort of building this up, feeling like there needs to be maybe some shape here. I haven't used this color pink in a bit, so I'm gonna find some of that and cut out another shape. And notice this collage is sort of compared to this one that I made, which was kind of straight up and down. This one is interesting because it's sort of a balancing act that, you know, that goes off center. And what we know about composition and what's pleasing to the eye when we're looking at art or a photograph or anything is that the eye actually prefers things to not be super symmetrical. That's where you create interest in your work, is by making things slightly askew, because whatever is symmetrical feels probably too normal to the eye, and so using some kind of variation is actually really pleasing. All right, I'm gonna throw a little sort of color, a little bit of a different color into this. I have this handmade sparkly paper, and it has a little bit of blue in it, and I'm gonna make this a little bit smaller. You can see we're getting close to the top.
We've got people who are commenting, Lisa, and Amy Wright on Facebook says, tuning in from Ashburn, Virginia. Lisa, I see a black mustache and a tongue, the orange shape in your design, which I didn't see that at first, but totally.
I know, I love that. And that's the thing. It's like when you work abstractly, this is an abstract collage, right? When you work abstractly, you don't, you're just going for sort of overall balance. And then people, you or other people viewing your collage might see something totally different than you would see, because that's the wonderful thing about abstract art, is like you get to use your imagination. I think we're getting close to being done here. I'm really focusing on the black as the sort of balancing element in this collage, and I'm feeling like we need a little bit more towards the top. So I'm going to grab this piece of paper. And again, if you were to make another collage, like how amazing is this shape right here, right? You could, like I said before, make another collage with all of the pieces that got cut away when you were making your ovals and circles. That's a really fun activity. So the wonderful thing about collage is, like, you don't necessarily even have to waste paper. You can reuse all of your scraps in other collages. All right, let me gotta figure out where this looks the best. I'm very much at the top here, and notice I'm not gonna just put it right on top. Of that piece. I'm gonna like kind of tilt it a little bit, and so I lay it down. Then I add the glue. Oh, pro tip: if I were doing this all day or making a bigger piece, I would keep a wet paper towel or a rag with some warm, well, I guess you could say warm water, but it would probably cool off pretty quickly. But a rag with water or paper towel with water, because your hands will get really sticky with the glue. You can't avoid getting it on your hands. And what will happen over time is that the oil from your skin or whatever dirt is on your skin, or in this case, I've got the glitter from the handmade paper on my finger, that can get transferred to other pieces of paper. And so you want to keep your hands as clean as possible. So I don't have one here now, but having like a wet paper towel or wet rag to wipe your hands off periodically while you're using glue is really a good idea. So there we have our collage, and I like the negative space around this, but you could also fill up the collage a little bit more. And like I said, one more thing, if you're using heavy paper and glue stick, you might notice that the paper doesn't want to stick down onto the substrate. And so a good practice is to get a bunch of heavy books, and when you're done making the collage, weight it down so the glue can dry onto the substrate nice and flat. And there we have it.
Awesome. I was wondering if you could just pull it towards you just a tad so we can see the full
Is that
bit.
better?
I think so. Yeah. Yeah. We have Piper Hayworth, who says she's tuning in from her kitchen in Portland.
Hi, Piper.
And
Piper.
Awesome. And she's not too far away from you, which is fantastic. Yeah. And Saxton Moore, who is an animator and chiming in. Amy Wright is saying, I'll fill it up with writings as well. Great background for a bullet journal. Love it, Lisa.
I love that. That's a great idea.
I think it's so fabulous to kind of see the behind the scenes, the walkthrough of how you think about composition, as well as the color combos. And thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Shall we turn my phone around again?
That's what I was just going to say.
Okay, I'm going to do that.
So I want to again encourage everybody, if you're just tuning in, we are here with Lisa Congdon, who has just showed us how to create a shapes collage, which I don't know about you, but right now finding things that are calming and meditative is so important, and just a way to look at the things around you differently, and just literally like doing something with your hands and creating. And Mother's Day is coming up. Like, what a wonderful thing to have to create intentionally for someone. So Lisa, I think we've got you back now.
Yes. And I was going to say too, like I mentioned this earlier, but this kind of activity is so great for kids. So if you're looking for an activity to do with kids, and if your kids are really small and can't use scissors yet, or you don't have kid scissors at your house, you can cut shapes for them and lay them out on a table, give them some glue. Glue stick's also great for kids because you can just teach them to like use it sparingly because I think liquid glue gets really messy. But if that's all you have, I recommend putting some in a bowl and using a paintbrush instead of trying to like squirt glue on paper. That helps the liquid glue to lay a little bit flatter. But yeah, this is a great activity for the entire family to make together.
Absolutely. Can you mention again for Amy Wright, who's asking the name of the scissors again?
Oh yeah. Tonic. So if you Google tonic scissors, there's like, they have a million different, not a million, but they have a lot of different kinds, and they're craft scissors and just really wonderful for paper cutting.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
So I also wanted to talk a little bit about your book while we have you.
Yeah.
I mean, your book, you have, is it 8 different books?
Yeah.
So the latest book, the Artistic Voice book.
Yeah.
What have you been hearing from people? First, tell us a little bit about it, and then how it's helping people during this time.
Yeah. So this is so funny. Somebody's calling me right now, so I'm going to decline. There we go. Real life, people. Yep. Okay, so the book is called Find Your Artistic Voice, and it's exactly about that. One of the questions that for the last several years that I was getting more than just about any question was, how do you find your style? Like, how do you make your mark? Like, how do you come to this place where you've found your voice and people can see your work and say, oh, that's Lisa's work, or that's Kenna's work, or that's Joe's work? Like, how do we get there? And I knew I had gotten there, and I had some ideas about how I had gotten there, but I decided to write a book about it because it was kind of partly a personal exploration. Like, um, I wanted to go back and reflect on what my journey was. I'm self-taught. I didn't go to school, so my journey was a lot more sort of like clunky than I think a lot of people's journeys are in terms of finding their voice. But there are so many people out there who are aspiring artists and have this big question, like, how do I know when I've arrived at the place where my work is like, where I'm in the flow, right? Where my work is, where I found my voice. And so the book is partly based on my own personal experience, and then based on a lot of research. I did a lot of research on creativity, and I interviewed 11 artists about their journey and their perspective on voice finding. And so the book covers everything from like, what is it? What is a voice? What does it mean to have one? Because a lot of people think it's just your style, but it's really so much more than that.
Tell me more about
well,
that.
It's, you know, your style is a really important part of your voice. That's the sort of like aesthetic part of your work that is recognizable. But so many people work in similar styles, right? Because we're influenced, and the book also covers influence and the importance of influence and how to navigate it. But because we work in sort of genres of work, because we're influenced, what makes your work yours is actually kind of partly in your DNA, right? And partly based on your own story of what, in your own, it's like a mirror into you and what you find interesting, what you find beautiful, what you find painful. Like, all of the stuff you choose to make work about is a reflection of you. It's part of your story. And that's going to be different from person to person. Your style might be similar to somebody else's, but your story is always only yours, right? And the merging of your style, like your choices around color palette and medium and line and shape and all that stuff mixed in, like in a big pot with your life story, your, all the things that you make work about, even if they're very simple, mundane things, or your work is abstract, it's still a reflection of you. It's still going to be very different than what other people are doing. And it's really kind of a hard mixture for a lot of people to figure out. And that's partly because it doesn't happen overnight. It takes years and years of showing up at your art desk or your studio or your potter's wheel or whatever, and just making a lot of work and making a lot of crappy work that doesn't work, so that you can get to the work that does work. And that is a unique, kind of special expression of you. And it takes a lot of discipline and a lot of showing up. And, another thing that I talk about in the book, and I talk about this a lot on Instagram too, there's what Ira Glass of This American Life coined this term, the beginner gap. And I love this analogy, right? So when we first start making art, or maybe we've been making art for years, but we try a new medium, we have our vision of what we want that to look like. And we start making art or we start making a new kind of art because we have an idea about what we want to make, or maybe we follow somebody who makes that kind of work and we want to make work that looks as amazing as theirs. But our vision is always like a huge, very far away from our current ability, because when you're a beginner, you don't actually have the practice time in or the skills yet to make that thing that's in your head. So we start off and we think, here I am, but here's what I want to be. And we sit down to make the thing and it looks like crap, right? Or it looks like maybe you might get lucky and your first or second one looks good, but eventually you're going to make a lot of crap. And what happens to a lot of people is they say, well, I must not be good at this. So, or that chasm between where they are and where they want to be, between their skill and their taste level, is so huge that they quit. They give up. We are all creative people, but not everybody has the sort of like perseverance to kind of like wade through the shark tank, as I call it, or to get into the shark tank, to get to that other side. And And so a really important part of being a creative person who eventually builds skill is just like going into that uncomfortable place, that abyss of not knowing what you're doing, making stuff that doesn't look like you want it to look, and just continually showing up in that process. And that's what's hard. And that's what makes finding your voice hard. And you have to sort of like find joy in that process, or camaraderie and community, in order to like persevere, because it's tough. We've all been there. It's tough.
Well, and it just seems like, again, that I love the Shark Tank going through, but also not judging yourself, because I feel like that we're always our own harshest critics. And so if you can, like you said, approach with this, I like to always say, beginner's mindset as well, that why would you expect yourself to know how to do it all instinctively?
I know, we're so hard on ourselves. We think we should be able to do these things that take people years to and it's also helpful to remember, like, every artist was once an amateur, which is one of my favorite quotes. I think maybe Ralph Waldo Emerson said that. And it's true. It's like we look at somebody on social media or YouTube or Instagram and we think, oh, they can do these things so well and so easily. Like, I just made a collage in 10 minutes. And while that might be easy for you, it's going to be really hard for somebody else. And so we think, oh, I should be able to do that. But I have years of practice, right? And your greatest art heroes or design heroes or creative heroes have been working at things for years and years, right? Which is why they can show up and just sort of make something with ease. And so comparing yourself to other people is a very dangerous rabbit hole, because everyone's sort of path and journey and background is so different. And we often don't take that into consideration when we're looking at what other people can do that we wish we could do. I just, as I mentioned earlier in this episode, I started making ceramics in the last year, and I bought a kiln, and one of my best friends is a ceramics artist, and she's moving her studio this week, but for the last year, she's been down the street from me. And so I've had access to like calling her up saying, oh, I don't know what to do. Like, should I be using cone 6 or cone? Is this low fire or high fire? Like all the things like. And I have been making batches of things, and literally within every batch, there's like about a third to a half that something goes wrong. Like I haven't done something properly, and the piece is unsellable or basically trash. And it's been such a great lesson for me, like being a beginner again and just persevering through that like feeling of grief and loss over all the time I spent on these things and ceramics is kind of special because anytime you have to put something in an oven, all the kinds of things can go wrong. So it's especially frustrating when something doesn't work out, but it's also like the best lesson in letting go. For example, I had a piece that I was so excited about last week, and I took it out of the kiln and I hadn't scraped something away that needed to be scraped away. And it just didn't work. And I was so disappointed over this one particular piece. And I had to like seriously take a deep breath and calm myself down and say, I can try this again, knowing what I know now, the next time I do a batch. And that's just like, I feel like the creative process is such a great analogy for everything in life, right? Not just making things, but using our mistakes or our sort of failures or our not knowing how to do something as an opportunity to learn and grow and improve. And also just an opportunity to like be gentle with yourself, because nobody's perfect. Nobody's out there making perfect work. And sometimes I think we think that, right? Because the internet gives us that impression.
Well, my therapist once taught me, don't should on yourself. Don't should on yourself. And I use that all the time because the shoulds come and come and come. And then, whenever you hear that word in your mind, it's a good one to, like you said, learning to let go and letting go,
Right.
which is something that is so important, again, right now, in terms of looking at these challenging times as an opportunity. And that's what, again, I've seen you do, as well as for creatives. I feel like, well, and we believe there's a creator in all of us, like you said. It not everybody might look at themselves that way, but you have that in you. And
that's right. We're all inherently creative. Like, we all have the ability, not necessarily the ability to be as artistic as the next person, but creativity comes in so many different forms, not just artistic expression. It's innovation. It's thinking about things differently. And scientists are creative, and mathematicians are creative. All the people trying to find, create a vaccine for coronavirus are creative. All of the doctors trying to navigate having, full hospitals are being creative right now. Like, and that's the exciting thing about this time that we're in, is like, so much creativity is happening because often we're forced to innovate when things don't go, or we have like a world crisis. Things aren't going as we had planned.
Absolutely. When there are constraints, you have to
Yes.
problem solve, and
That's right.
that's what innovation and creativity is.
Right. It's
So
true. Yeah, I was going to say too, in the book, one of the things I talk about is like inventing constraints for yourself, because it's actually a really great way to improve your craft, is to like throw some constraints at yourself. I'm only going to paint in this color for the next 3 weeks, or, I'm only going to do this. And it's amazing what can come out of something like that.
I think that's great. And we are kind of forced into that right now,
Yeah.
but taking that as a lesson moving forward is a beautiful thing to do. Lisa, thank you so much for joining us today. I love that it was, had my coffee. I'm going to continue to work on mine this morning, and I'll post that on Instagram so you can see. And
if anyone else ends up making a shapes collage, or your kids make one, please post it on like on Instagram, either in a post or in a story, and tag me, and I'll repost it in my feed. Yeah.
And you will, because I know I see you do that over and over and over.
I love posting other people's work. Yeah.
Tell us again where people can go tell us again a little bit about the kids art class that you've done with Adobe.
Yeah, so I launched a really simple, really basic art class for kids, and the age ranges, I would say, like 4 or 5, like kindergarten, pre-K to 3rd grade, depending on, it's flexible enough that any kid within that range would probably enjoy it. It's probably not appropriate for older kids, but super simple drawing classes. So the first episode, which is out already, and the second episode, which are out already, we talk about lines and shapes and connecting lines to make shapes, and then using shapes to draw, basically, because everything we draw is a shape, or everything we collage is a shape. And then the next episode, which comes out on Monday, is also just an extension. And then we dive into color. And then there's a whole episode in the 5th week, which is about, kind of figuring out what to draw when you don't have any ideas, which I think for a lot of kids is not a problem, but for a lot of kids that overthink it, it is a problem. And that class is on Adobe Create, the Adobe Create channel. And I have a direct link to it from my Instagram profile, so you can go there. People can find me on Instagram and, view my shop and more of my work on my website, which is lisacongdon.com. Yeah.
Now is the time to support your artists and your artist friends, the artist community. That is another thing that we're, of course, trying to do and help people do here on CreativeLive TV. Also, for the adults out there who are creatives and are looking for things to watch other than Netflix, of course, you have your classes here on Creative Live. I can distinctly remember hosting your workflow, time management, and productivity for creatives class, which, again, right now, a lot of people are looking for structure, and because or else, the days go by. So that class in particular is one that I think it can be super helpful for people right now who are trying to sort of figure out those the ways to be organized.
That's right. And like kind of put boundaries around the activities in their day. We all need structure, and right now especially because we don't have our usual structure.
Exactly. And then you have class on working successfully with clients, class for illustrators and designers, become a working artist. And so you can all go check those classes out on Creative Live. Just search Lisa Congdon. You can find those. And once again, thank you so much for joining us. If you enjoyed this, folks out there, feel free to share it with everybody you know so that they can have a creative project throughout this time as well. So Lisa, thank you again. Have a beautiful day. I'm looking around the room and seeing shapes everywhere now, and especially your glasses. I love the shape of your red glasses.
Thank you. Yeah, I put on my red glasses today. It's a special day. Yes.
All right. You take care, Lisa. And to everybody else out there, you take care as well. You can check out everything that is coming up here on Creative Live TV by just looking at the schedule below. We are coming to you, like I said, from the living rooms, home studios, makeshift home studios of our favorite artists, musicians, and entrepreneurs, people who are authors, having Q&As with them. We are filming live sessions of the podcast that I host here on Creative Live. We are photographers, as well as Chase Jarvis live show. So tons of new content coming to you every day. So thank you again to Lisa Congdon, and we will see you all next time. Take care.
Bye, everyone.